Michael Jackson claimed that Tatum O'Neal, his first girlfriend, was the person he first became intimate with. She later shocked the world by revealing the truth in her book. In 1963, Hollywood rejoiced the birth of a baby girl, Tatum O'Neal, daughter of famous actors Ryan O'Neal and Joanna Moore. Living out a real-life happy ending, the couple welcomed another child, a boy named Griffin, only a year later. But behind the scenes, the marriage was turbulent, tempers flared, and personalities clashed. Tatum and Griffin found themselves caught in the crossfire. What began a fairy tale romance between two high-profile celebrities quickly spoiled in the span of 4 years. By 1967, O'Neal's parents secured a divorce and her mother had sole custody of both her and Griffin. But Joanna Moore wasn't as fit to be a mother as she seemed. Moore was an addict whose actions transformed Tatum O'Neal's childhood into a living nightmare. Tatum O'Neal watched her mother lose herself to substances and drinking. Perhaps most shocking were her accounts of starvation. Both she and Griffin weren't properly fed or clothed, suffering deeply from their mother's neglect. She claims that on one occasion, the two of them, trapped in a garage, resorted to eating dog food in order to stay alive. But the horrors didn't end there. O'Neal's mother never actually mothered, and she often left her children unsupervised. They did anything they wanted, sometimes playing with fire and jumping off the roof, other times running away from home. In her own words, O'Neal recalled, quote, "We went to the bathroom on the floor. We did a lot of crazy things because we didn't have any guidance at all." Quote. So not only did Tatum O'Neal experience an unfortunate childhood due to her mother, she also had traumatic experiences thanks to her mother's then boyfriend. The physical and emotional toll of her upbringing was unspeakable. She didn't go to school. Nobody fed her. Nobody offered her a shred of real love. But there was one thing she still hoped for: her father. In 1970, Joanna Moore finally lost custody of her children. And beyond this loss, she never truly recovered her sobriety. In the wake of this separation, O'Neal and her brother were sent to live with her father. Things seemed to be looking up. With her father, she experienced a more attentive parent than ever before. Perhaps she'd finally get the childhood she'd been dreaming of. Or not. Tatum O'Neal's father took his kids everywhere he went. But sadly, this didn't shield them from witnessing his playboy celebrity life. Ryan O'Neal liked his women and his vices, and in so many ways, Tatum remained exposed to a nefarious adult world. But it was more than that. Her father had a temper, and she often found herself on the receiving end of his wrath. With so much hope, she escaped from one dysfunctional house only to find herself trapped in another. But if there was one thing her father did have, it was influence within the world of acting. And it was his world that changed the course of her life forever. When her father recommended her for the role of Addie in Paper Moon, O'Neal won the part and broke into the acting world. Working alongside her father seemed like the perfect bonding opportunity, but in reality it was anything but. Tatum O'Neal was a revelation in her role, her acting so marvelous that she outshone her father in so many scenes. But Ryan O'Neal wasn't as proud as others expected him to be. Instead, he was completely jealous. He couldn't stand being upstaged by his own daughter. O'Neal admitted that her part in Paper Moon destroyed her relationship with her father. When the film premiered, the praise for her performance hung in the air, feeding Ryan O'Neal's deep resentment. Nobody was talking about his performance. He wasn't the center of attention anymore. And then came the record-breaking moment when the Academy announced Tatum O'Neal's Oscar nomination. At her first Oscars ceremony, O'Neal sported a very trendy pixie cut and a dapper suit, but this haircut didn't come by choice. When Ryan O'Neal jetted off to film Barry Lyndon, he left Tatum with Stanley Kubrick's family, not just for a couple nights, but for an entire year. And as a result, she and the Kubrick's daughter, Vivian, spent a lot of time together. While playing during bath time, Vivian cut off all of Tatum's hair. She had no choice but to attend the Oscars with a brand new do. Throughout her childhood, Tatum O'Neal's father took her to adult parties no young girl had any business attending. She went wherever he went, and this included such mature places as the Playboy Mansion. Her exposure to these escapes forced O'Neal to grow up quickly and imparted a trauma that followed her into adulthood. She was desperate to find someone to connect to. Lost in the void of her parents' inattention, she sought friendship. So when Ryan and Tatum O'Neal went to Europe so Ryan could film A Bridge Too Far, Tatum decided to bring along one of her closest friends at the time, Melanie Griffith. With a young naivety, she wholeheartedly believed that she had found her best friend. What she didn't know was that Melanie had a secret agenda, and it didn't involve Tatum at all. Unbeknownst to Tatum, Melanie and her father had an unspoken attraction. Her so-called best friend hadn't come to Europe to be with her, but instead, was there to be with her father. When O'Neal realized that her friend Melanie was spending more time with her father than herself, she was overcome with feelings of utter betrayal, and she made a shocking decision. After finding out about her best friend and her father's relationship, O'Neal felt more alone than ever. She decided to end it all. When this proved unsuccessful, she decided to turn to substances. Growing up with her father, she knew exactly where to find substances, her father's friends. But the person she sought out wasn't a nice man, and Tatum's plan went terribly awry. Although she managed to get her hands on the stuff she was after, her father's friend also assaulted her. Sadly, this wasn't her first traumatic experiences with men. Earlier in her life, while she was still living with her mother's then boyfriend tried to assault her. In later years, O'Neal blamed these accounts on neglect, specifically due to her parents' substance addictions. But neglect was all Tatum O'Neal knew, and as she grew older, it defined the emptiness of her home life. Now, when Tatum O'Neal was a teenager filming on the set of International Velvet, she lost her virginity to a crew member who was also working on the set at that time. Disturbingly, this unnamed man was 16 years her senior. With no reliable parent to turn to and constantly in the company of other adults, O'Neal had a skewed idea of the romantic relationship. Quote, "I didn't understand the difference in our ages. I thought it was something along the lines of, this is what people do." Quote, Tatum O'Neal's next high-profile relationship was with the hot-headed tennis pro John McEnroe. The two met in 1984 and she quickly moved into his New York apartment, but their romance was far from smooth sailing. Both of them dug deep into partying, and to top it all off, John had a fiery temper. After their marriage in 1986, Tatum and John's relationship became a wild ride of highs and lows. Their happy moments included the birth of 3 children, Emily, Sean, and Kevin, but through it all, Tatum continued to struggle with her drug addiction. As a result, constant fighting ensued, and it wasn't long before John reached the end of his rope. After this, their relationship was not only on the rocks, but headed for the point of no return. After 6 years of marriage, they separated, finalizing their divorce in 1994. In the following years, O'Neal fell off the deep end, completely giving into her addiction. It was this behavior that had people questioning whether she was fit for motherhood. Tatum O'Neal's children knew when their mother was high and stayed away. Things took a turn for the worse when 7-year-old Emily found drug-related equipment in O'Neal's apartment. In a 2015 interview, her son Sean opened up about growing up with Tatum. Quote, "I would lock myself in my room because it was hard to be around her not acting like herself. I had a hard time speaking about it and I shut down." Quote, and in the end, like her mother, by exposing her children to vices, Tatum paid the ultimate price. In 1998, O'Neal lost custody of her children for a reason not unlike her own mother's. But O'Neal wasn't ready to follow in her mother's footsteps and vowed to get her kids back. She worked hard to get clean and eventually regained partial custody. O'Neal had a lot of time to make up for, and she devoted years to rebuilding her bond with her children. But there was one person she still butt heads with, her ex-husband. In his revealing memoir, You Cannot Be Serious, John exposed intimate details about his and Tatum's relationship. He even talked about how they were both high the first time they slept together. He went on to share even more details about her excessive drug use. When O'Neal caught wind about this book, she fired back by accusing him of using steroids. But there's a fine line between hate and love, and in retrospect, Tatum O'Neal admitted to harboring some regret. In a 2020 interview with CBS Sunday Morning, Tatum O'Neal revealed that she still holds a flame for her ex-husband. Quote, "The happiest times of my life were times that I was married. I was loved. I was cared for. I've never met anyone that even comes close to my ex-husband." Quote. Now, after winning the Oscar in 1974, Tatum O'Neal acted in a handful of films, such as The Bad News Bears and International Velvet, but heading into the mid-80s, the actress hit a wall. She simply wasn't getting the parts she wanted. Instead, she found herself settling for minor roles on television. She appeared on Sex and the City, Criminal Minds, and Law & Order, but nothing that could catapult her back to her original brush with fame and recognition. Finally, in 2004, Tatum O'Neal found a steady job by landing a recurring role in Rescue Me, a comedy drama series starring Dennis Leary as the lead. The show boasted staying power and lasted 7 seasons, with critics applauding O'Neal's portrayal of her character, Maggie Gavin, an alcoholic. While the role hit close to home, her darkest days seemed well behind her. Unfortunately, the shadow of addiction remained. In 2008, O'Neal hit another low. News of a scandalous arrest hit the tabloids. Officers had found her with illicit substances in her pockets only blocks from her Manhattan home. That's when her story began to spiral out of control. Her reasoning seemed all over the place, and nobody was quite sure of the entire truth. After the authorities caught her with substances, O'Neal tried to explain it away as research for an acting part. When that didn't fly, she turned to utter gratitude, thanking the force for saving her by preventing a relapse. She claimed sobriety and referred to the whole fiasco as a close call. Despite her excuses, O'Neal still faced charges and agreed to enter a treatment program. In the months that followed, she confronted her own demons and grappled with the humiliation of her relapse. Back in 2001, when O'Neal released her memoir, A Paper Life, the allegations against her father didn't sit well with him. According to him, O'Neal enjoyed a happy childhood, and he was, if not perfect, then at least an upstanding parent. His official statement in response to the book was as follows, quote, "It is a sad day when malicious lies are told in order to become a bestseller," quote. For years, father and daughter remained estranged. That is until Oprah entered the picture. In 2011, Oprah produced Ryan and Tatum, The O'Neals, a reality TV show that aired on her network OWN. The show centered on the troubled parental relationship, tracking their personal journey towards reconciliation. It hoped to pique the audience's interest by playing on the risk of it all. How could these two estranged individuals possibly find a way to heal their bond? On the surface, this may have seemed like a promising idea, but in the end, this experiment was far from a success. If there was one person unenthused about the reality TV show, it was O'Neal's ex-husband. For one, he had his children to consider, and he wanted them to have no part in the docuseries. In an interview with Wendy Williams, he called the show, quote, "an accident waiting to happen," quote. No stranger to O'Neal's disturbing childhood stories, McEnroe only saw disaster in the wings, and he was right. To bolster the release of the show, O'Neal also released another memoir, Found, A Daughter's Journey Home. It covered some familiar territory, but the new bent was her recent fence-mending journey with Ryan O'Neal. Their happy reunion all wrapped up in a tidy bow. But this shiny, idealistic front wasn't real. By September 2011, the truth had come out. Tatum and Ryan hadn't succeeded in ending their feud at all. In fact, Ryan O'Neal explicitly blamed Oprah for deepening the chasm between him and his daughter. Quote, "Did I open up? I tried. Does Tatum like me any better? No. So what's the point?" Quote, "One thing was for sure, there certainly wasn't a second season in the works." Now, Tatum O'Neal had 3 brothers, Griffin, whom she grew up with, as well as 2 half-brothers, Patrick and Redmond. Sadly, her relationship with all of them had proved somewhat turbulent and far from close. Over the years, Griffin helped corroborate O'Neal's stories about their traumatic childhoods and volatile father, but in 2015 he admitted that he no longer spoke to his sister. Perhaps unsurprisingly, he wasn't the only one. O'Neal's brother Patrick wishes that she never wrote any of her memoirs and maintains that her accounts of his father are completely at odds with his own experiences and upbringing. Ultimately, this disagreement prevented them from ever building a strong sibling bond, and they remain distant to this day. But perhaps the saddest of all is O'Neal's relationship with her 3rd brother. The trajectory of Redmond O'Neal, Tatum's youngest brother, is a tale of woe. Not unlike his sister, he became addicted to substances at an early age. He was constantly in and out of rehab, but displayed no signs of recovery. O'Neal tried to reach out to him, but quickly realized her efforts were in vain. Quote, "From what I've seen, there is no way he is going to survive." Quote, her defeatist attitude was only proved when Redmond was incarcerated in 2018 for armed robbery and attempted murder. Now there's one more story about Tatum O'Neal that hasn't yet been mentioned. Famously, a young Tatum caught the eye of one very famous pop star, 17-year-old Michael Jackson. O'Neal and Jackson shared a very close friendship, wasting away long hours chatting on the phone. The very picture of adolescent nervousness and awkwardness. They even attended a famed club, Studio 54, together, but when it came to the stirrings of the heart, one party seemed to be on a completely different page. The two of them ended up dating for a brief time, but when Jackson revealed that he wanted to take their intimacy to a higher level, O'Neal shied away. After all, she was still a young teenager and didn't feel ready. Despite their youth, their short but sweet romance made an indelible impression on Jackson, and in a 2001 interview, he reminisced about O'Neal. Quote, "I was like in heaven, it was the most magical thing," quote, but there was more to it than just that. Jackson later flipped the script on O'Neal and made some claims of his own. Firstly, he claimed to have lost his virginity to her. Secondly, he said that she was the seducer who tried to take their relationship to the next level and that he was the one afraid of intimacy. This was quite the opposite of O'Neal's own story. In her 2004 autobiography, she denied all his claims and said they never even slept together. Now that was the turbulent story of Tatum O'Neal. If you enjoyed this story and are interested in more Hollywood and celebrity stories, hit the like button and make sure to subscribe.